Step away from the vehicle now. The command cracked across the gas station like a dropped wrench, sharp enough to make every head turn beneath the white glare of the canopy lights. Marcus Reed had one hand on the pump and the other wrapped around a paper bag with a bottle of blood pressure medicine inside, and for half a second he thought the officer had to be talking to someone else. Then he saw the patrol car angled beside his pickup, saw the rigid stance of Officer Daniel Whitmore, saw the way the man's eyes had already settled on him with that cold, finished look that left no room for explanation. The smell of gasoline hung thick in the humid Georgia night. Neon from the convenience store window washed the pavement in a tired blue glow. Somewhere behind the glass, a hot dog roller clicked slowly in place. Marcus set the pump back with careful hands, the metal handle clinking louder than it should have, and turned just enough to show he was listening. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered, wearing a faded charcoal hoodie, jeans, and boots dusted from the road. Nothing about him looked dangerous. Nothing about him looked hurried. But Whitmore's hand stayed near his belt, and his voice only got louder, as if volume could turn suspicion into fact. I said step away from the truck. A woman by the ice freezer froze with her keys halfway to her hand. A teenage boy at the next pump lowered his phone, then raised it again when he realized something was happening. Marcus did what men like him learned to do long before they ever wore a uniform for their country. He moved slowly. He kept his shoulders loose. He kept his face calm. The paper bag crinkled in his fingers as he set it on the hood. "Officer," he said, steady and respectful, "my license is in the glove box." It should have been a simple sentence. It should have ended there. But Whitmore glanced at the truck, a dark blue Ford with a navy decal on the rear window, and something in his expression tightened instead of softened. His gaze moved from the truck to Marcus, then back again, measuring the man against the vehicle as if one of them did not belong to the other. "Whose truck is this?" he asked. Marcus blinked once. The question landed heavier than the night air. "Mine." Whitmore gave a humorless little smile, the kind that wasn't amusement at all, just disbelief dressed up as authority. Inside the store, the cashier, a young woman with a name tag that read Lena, pressed closer to the window. Marcus could feel the eyes on him now, the quiet hunger strangers carried when a public moment started turning ugly. He hated that feeling more than he hated the officer's tone. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew exactly how quickly a lie could grow once enough people were watching it. He lifted his empty hands a little higher, palms open, and let the silence stretch. The fluorescent lights above them buzzed like trapped insects. A truck rumbled past on the highway beyond the lot. Whitmore took one step closer. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said. And that was the moment Marcus understood this had nothing to do with gas, or paperwork, or a routine stop on a warm night in Georgia. This was about what the officer thought he was looking at. This was about what Marcus represented before he ever said a word. He drew in one slow breath, tasted fuel and summer heat, and looked straight at the badge glinting on Whitmore's chest. Then the officer glanced toward the pickup's dashboard, and everything changed. Whitmore did not look at Marcus when he spoke again. He was staring through the windshield now, at the small details spread across the dashboard and center console, as if they had suddenly become more interesting than the man standing in front of him. There was a folded pharmacy receipt, a half-empty bottle of water, a pair of tan tactical gloves worn soft at the knuckles, and clipped beside the steering column, almost invisible unless you knew what you were looking for, was a weathered access badge on a black lanyard. Marcus saw the officer's eyes pause on it for 1 second too long. Not because Whitmore understood it, but because he did not. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he said. Marcus almost smiled at that, not from humor, but from the familiar ache of being treated like a threat while doing absolutely nothing threatening. He kept his hands open, fingers spread slightly in the damp night air. The paper bag sat on the hood. Between them, its top folded neatly over the medicine bottle inside. He thought about his mother sitting in her small brick house 12 miles away, probably awake in her recliner with the television turned low, waiting for the porch light to catch his truck in the driveway. He had called her 20 minutes earlier and told her he was close. He had said, "I am on my way, Mama. Just one stop." Now the stop had become something else. Lena pushed open the glass door of the convenience store, the little bell above it giving a thin metallic ring. "Officer," she said carefully, not too loud. "He has been here maybe 5 minutes. He paid for pump 4 and bought medicine." Whitmore lifted one hand toward her without taking his eyes off Marcus, the gesture small and dismissive. "Go back inside, ma'am." The words were polite. The tone was not. Lena hesitated, then pressed her lips together and stepped back, but she did not go far. She stayed just inside the door with both hands wrapped around a coffee cup, watching through the glass. Marcus noticed that witnesses mattered. Truth mattered. But truth often arrived late, and men like Whitmore were used to acting in the space before it showed up. "You military?" the officer asked at last, nodding toward the badge. Marcus answered the question the same way he had answered all the others, calm enough to leave no excuse for escalation. "Yes, sir." "What branch?" "Navy." Whitmore's eyes narrowed slightly, not with respect, but with suspicion that had changed shape and found a new costume. "That your badge in the truck?" "Yes, sir." "Then why is it not on you?" Marcus let the silence sit for a beat. The answer was simple. He had taken it off after a 17-hour travel day because the lanyard rubbed against his neck, and because for one brief drive across town, he wanted to feel like a son again, not a file number, not a specialist, not a man carrying classified pieces of himself he could never explain at family dinner. "Because I am off duty," he said. Somewhere behind the patrol car, a moth battered itself against the station light. The boy at the next pump had stopped pretending not to film. Marcus could hear the faint electronic chirp of a phone camera adjusting focus. Whitmore shifted his weight and finally looked Marcus in the face again. There was something colder there now, something sharpened by the idea that this man in front of him might have credentials, might have discipline, might have earned a kind of respect the officer was not prepared to give freely. "Off duty," he repeated, like the phrase itself offended him. Then his gaze dropped to Marcus's hoodie, then to the truck, then back to Marcus, making the same cruel calculation all over again. "Funny," he said quietly. "You do not look like someone who belongs behind the wheel of this truck." The night seemed to contract around that sentence. Not because it was loud, but because it did not need to be. Marcus felt it land with the flat, familiar weight of something older than the moment, older than the badge, older than the neon lights humming over the pumps. He kept his chin level. He did not raise his voice. He did not look away. "Looks can fool people," he said. And from somewhere inside the patrol car, the radio suddenly crackled to life. The radio burst with static, then a dispatcher's voice cut through the warm Georgia night, clipped and distant, asking Whitmore to confirm his location. He answered without looking away from Marcus, his tone changing the way some men change posture, straighter and more official when they knew someone else was listening. "Station on Route 17, he said. "Possible stolen vehicle. Possible false military identification." The words hung in the air heavier than the humidity. Marcus felt the teenage boy with the phone shift closer by a few feet. He heard the convenience store door open again, then close, Lena no longer pretending she was not listening. False military identification. Marcus could have laughed if the moment had not felt so tired already. He had spent years in places where men lied to survive, where danger wore disguises, where every decision had weight. Yet here, under fluorescent lights and beside a cooler humming full of ice, the strangest accusation he had heard in months had come from a man in a local police uniform who had not checked a single fact. "Officer," Marcus said, keeping his voice low and clear, "my identification is real. My registration is in the glove box with my insurance card. You can verify both." Whitmore did not move. He had reached that dangerous place some people reached when pride became more important than truth. Marcus knew the look. It was not rage. It was not panic. It was certainty without discipline, the kind that made a person cling harder to the wrong idea the moment reality began pushing back. "You will speak when I ask you to speak," Whitmore said. The line was meant to reduce him, to shrink him, to turn him into a body waiting for instruction instead of a man standing in plain sight with every answer available. Marcus let the insult pass through him. He did not lower his eyes. He did not let the officer borrow his calm and turn it into weakness. Behind Whitmore, a pickup rolled slowly into the lot, then kept going when the driver saw the patrol car and the gathering attention. Even strangers could read the air now. Something was off. Something did not fit. Lena came out again, this time holding a printed receipt in one hand. Her sneakers squeaked lightly against the concrete as she stopped near the ice chest. "He used a credit card," she said, more firmly now. Name on the card matched his license when he showed it at the register because the chip reader failed. Marcus turned his head slightly, surprised she had noticed that detail at all. He remembered the moment now. The card machine had flashed red, and he had handed over his license without thinking twice because ordinary errands were supposed to stay ordinary. Lena lifted the receipt a little higher. I saw the name. Marcus read. Whitmore took the paper from her without thanks, glanced at it, then folded it once. For the first time, the silence around him seemed to press back. The evidence was no longer abstract. It was printed in black ink and still warm from the register. But instead of easing, his face hardened. Marcus recognized it instantly. The officer was cornered, and cornered pride often chose escalation over retreat. A credit card does not prove ownership, Whitmore said, and a name on a receipt does not explain that badge. Marcus looked toward his truck, toward the black lanyard resting beside the steering wheel where he had left it after parking. The badge was real. The truck was his. The medicine in the paper bag was for his mother. Every piece of the night was simple, ordinary, explainable. But prejudice had a way of taking ordinary things and rearranging them into suspicion. Then run the plate, Marcus said. Call it in. Check the registration. Check my name. Check the badge if you want. That is what procedure is for. The word procedure landed differently. It sounded like a challenge, even though it was not meant to be one. Whitmore heard it that way anyway. Marcus saw the flash of irritation move through his jaw. The officer took one slow step closer, enough for the leather on his duty belt to creak. You think you know my job? He asked. Marcus almost answered yes. Not because he thought he knew police work better than this man, but because he knew authority, and he knew exactly what it looked like when someone used it to search for obedience instead of truth. He kept that thought to himself. I think facts matter, he said. For a second no one moved. The canopy lights buzzed overhead. The soda machine beside the store rattled softly as its compressor kicked on. Far down the road, a siren wailed and faded. Then Whitmore reached for his radio again, his eyes still locked on Marcus, and this time when he spoke into it, his voice carried the kind of decision that changed everything. Send another unit, he said. I may be making an arrest. Marcus heard the words and felt the night change around them. Not because the air moved or the lights dimmed, but because once a man in uniform said arrest out loud, everyone nearby began to act like the truth had already been settled. The teenage boy with the phone shifted to get a better angle. A woman at pump 2 quietly stepped back into her car and locked the door. Lena stood frozen beside the ice chest, the receipt still in her hand, her coffee forgotten completely now. Marcus did not move. He did not need to. He had learned a long time ago that stillness could carry more strength than panic ever could. Whitmore clipped the radio back onto his shoulder and squared himself like he was preparing for a difficult task, even though the only difficulty in front of him was his own refusal to listen. Turn around, he said. Marcus kept his hands visible at chest level, open and empty. On what charge? The question was calm, precise, and dangerous for one reason. Only. It forced the officer to name what he had not yet proved. Whitmore did not answer right away. His eyes flicked toward the truck, toward the badge, toward the people watching. He was not thinking about procedure now. He was thinking about control. Marcus could see it in the way the man held his jaw, in the way he planted his boots a little wider, as if certainty could be manufactured by posture alone. I am investigating possible vehicle theft and false representation, Whitmore said at last. The phrasing sounded official. It also sounded borrowed, like words chosen to make a weak moment feel stronger than it was. Marcus let out one measured breath through his nose. He could smell gasoline, hot rubber, stale coffee from the trash can near the entrance. He could also smell rain coming somewhere far off, a wet metallic edge in the summer air. Then investigate, he said. Run the plate. Check the registration. Call the number on the badge. Lena stepped forward before she could stop herself. Officer, he told you where everything is. You can verify it in 2 minutes. Whitmore turned toward her so quickly that even Marcus felt the air tighten. Ma'am, go back inside. She did not move this time. Her face had gone pale, but her voice held. I work here. Those cameras saw the whole thing. Marcus looked at her and gave the smallest shake of his head, not because she was wrong, but because he knew how easily decent people got pulled into ugly moments when power wanted an audience. She understood anyway. Her mouth pressed into a line, and she retreated one step, though her eyes never left Whitmore. The officer faced Marcus again. "Turn around," he repeated. The second time he said it, there was more heat and less authority. Marcus knew he had reached the edge of a line that had been drawn without fairness. Everything in him wanted to keep speaking in facts, to keep the moment anchored to procedure, to keep it from sliding into the kind of public humiliation that never quite washed off. But he also knew the eyes on him were waiting for one wrong move, one frustrated gesture, one human reaction they could misunderstand on purpose. So he chose discipline, not the kind the officer demanded, the kind he had earned. Slowly, Marcus lowered his hands. Slowly, he turned. The concrete beneath his boots was still warm from the day, and the station lights threw his shadow long across the pavement toward Pump 4. He could hear Whitmore stepping in behind him, the leather on the duty belt giving that same dry creak, the radio hissing softly, the crowd holding its breath in that ugly way people did when they sensed a moment turning into something they would talk about later. Marcus stared at the hood of his own truck and saw the paper bag reflected faintly in the paint, the medicine bottle shape pressing against the thin brown fold. His mother was still waiting. That thought cut through everything else. He imagined the clock in her living room creeping past 9, then 9:15, then 9:30. He imagined her calling his phone and hearing it ring unanswered. "You are making a mistake," he said quietly. Whitmore did not answer. Marcus felt the officer take hold of his wrist, formal and controlled, not rough, but final in a way that made the entire gas station seem to go silent at once. The teenage boy lowered his phone for a second, stunned by the reality of it. Lena made a small sound under her breath, barely audible over the hum of the canopy lights. Marcus closed his eyes just long enough to steady himself, then opened them again to the reflection in the truck door. He saw his own face there, calm and unreadable. He saw Whitmore behind him, rigid with borrowed confidence. And just beyond them, through the convenience store glass, he saw the security monitor above the register quietly replaying the scene from another angle. By the time the second patrol car rolled into the lot, the story had already started hardening in the minds of the people watching. That was how moments like this worked. They formed fast, before facts had time to breathe. Marcus stood beside his own truck with his hands secured behind him, shoulders square, jaw set, saying nothing because there was nothing left to say that had not already been ignored. The first officer had chosen a version of events, and now the flashing lights painted that version across the gas station concrete in red and blue, turning suspicion into spectacle. The new officer who stepped out, a stocky man with tired eyes and a hand resting near his vest, looked from Whitmore to Marcus to the small cluster of witnesses near the store. "What do we have?" he asked. Whitmore answered quickly, too quickly, like a man afraid silence might invite doubt. "Possible stolen vehicle. Possible false military credentials. Subject has been evasive." Marcus lowered his eyes for a moment, not in shame, but to keep disappointment from showing on his face. Evasive. The word almost offended him more than the cuffs. He had answered every question. He had offered every path to verification. He had stood in plain view under station lights and given the truth chance after chance. But truth had no value here if it did not flatter the assumptions already in charge. Lena pushed through the store door again, this time with the courage of someone who knew she might regret speaking up and did it anyway. "That is not true," she said. Her voice shook on the first word, then steadied. He was calm the whole time. "I told Officer Whitmore I saw his card, his name, everything." The second officer looked at her, then at Whitmore. For a brief second, Marcus thought the tide might shift. Not enough to undo the damage, but enough to slow it. Enough to make someone stop and ask a better question. Instead, Whitmore cut in before the silence could work against him. "Witnesses do not determine probable cause," he said. The line sounded rehearsed, polished by repetition, the kind of sentence used to end conversation rather than find truth. Marcus lifted his head and looked out across the lot. A moth drifted under the canopy light. A diesel engine idled somewhere near the road. The teenage boy with the phone had backed up now, but he was still recording, still chasing the gravity of the scene without understanding its weight. Marcus wondered where that clip would end up by morning. Wondered how many strangers would watch a few seconds of his silence and decide they knew the whole story. The second officer stepped closer. "Sir, do you have anything on you we need to know about?" he asked. Marcus answered evenly. "Wallet in my back pocket. House keys in my left front pocket." Nothing else. Any weapons? No, sir. He could have explained that he had spent years around men trained to handle force with restraint, that discipline had been drilled so deeply into his body it showed up even in how he breathed under pressure. He could have said that the most dangerous thing in this parking lot was not on him at all. It was the certainty inside the wrong man. But he kept his words small. Small words survived better in hostile air. Lena held up the receipt again as if paper and ink still meant something. Please just look at the cameras, she said. It is all right there. Whitmore did not even turn. We will handle that at the station. At the station. The phrase landed like a door closing. Marcus knew what it meant. Once you were moved, processed, put into a room under fluorescent light and institutional time, your dignity became paperwork. Your humanity became sequence. Your side of the story had to wait its turn behind forms and reports, and whatever version got typed first. He looked at the paper bag still sitting on the hood of his truck, the top folded neat, the medicine inside growing warmer by the minute. He thought of his mother again, and this time the image hit harder. Her curtains drawn halfway, her Bible open on the side table, her phone charging beside the lamp. She would call soon. Then she would call again. Can I make one call? Marcus asked. Whitmore answered without hesitation. At the station. That was when Marcus felt the first real sting of humiliation. Not because he had been restrained in public, not because strangers were watching, but because a simple act of care was now being held behind someone else's pride. He closed his eyes for one heartbeat, opened them, and looked toward the convenience store windows. On the security monitor above the register, the silent replay kept cycling from the beginning, showing him arriving, paying, walking back to pump 4, calm and ordinary from start to finish. The truth was already on screen. It was playing on a loop in plain sight. And still, Whitmore reached for the rear door of the cruiser like the next step had become inevitable. The ride to the station was only 11 minutes, but time changed shape in the back of a patrol car. Marcus sat upright in the hard-molded seat, hands secured behind him, watching the town slide past through the divider and side window in broken pieces of light. A laundromat still glowed at the corner of Mercer and Pine. A church sign stood half-lit beneath an oak tree, its white letters washed pale in the humid dark. A woman in scrubs walked out of a 24-hour pharmacy carrying a plastic bag and rubbing her eyes. Ordinary life moved on outside the glass as if nothing had happened, as if a man could be pulled out of his own evening and folded into someone else's false story without the night itself noticing. The cruiser smelled faintly of vinyl, paper coffee cups, and summer heat trapped in fabric. The radio murmured in short bursts from the front seat, numbers and names and clipped acknowledgments, the language of systems too busy to care who they were carrying. Marcus leaned his head back just enough to rest against the partition and closed his eyes for a second. Not to escape, just to hold still inside himself. The medicine for his mother was still sitting on the hood of his truck in his mind, that thin brown paper bag glowing under the gas station lights like a promise he had failed to keep on time. He pictured her house again, smaller now in his imagination than it really was, because worry always shrank a place into the details that mattered most. The porch light, the crocheted throw over the recliner, the old clock above the television moving one patient minute at a time. She would not be angry. That was the hardest part. She would be worried, then quiet, then worried again. Marcus opened his eyes and looked down at the dark reflection of his own knees in the divider glass. He could still feel the shape of discipline inside his body, holding him together, keeping his breathing measured, keeping his face still even when humiliation pressed like weight against his ribs. He had worn a uniform long enough to understand what authority was supposed to sound like. It was supposed to be clear, not loud. Measured, not hungry. Anchored in fact, not ego. What happened at the gas station had not felt like authority. It had felt like assumption wearing a badge. The cruiser turned into the station lot, headlights washing over a row of parked vehicles and the blank brick wall beside the entrance. The building itself looked tired in the way public buildings often did after midnight, practical and fluorescent and stripped of comfort. Inside, the air was cold enough to raise goosebumps along Marcus's forearms. A deputy behind the desk glanced up, then down again. Keys rattled somewhere deeper in the hall. A printer hummed. Shoes crossed tile. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. Just bureaucracy waiting to absorb him. Whitmore was already moving with a clipped, efficient purpose now, as if getting Marcus into the system would somehow make the earlier choices feel cleaner. The second officer had gone quieter on the ride over, speaking only once to confirm intake. No one asked Marcus another real question. No one asked if the plate had been run. No one asked if the witness statement had been collected. Procedure had become a hallway people walked down without looking into the rooms. They guided him into processing, and a clerk with reading glasses low on her nose asked for his full name. Marcus Elijah Reed, he said. She typed it in. Date of birth. He answered. Occupation. The question sat there for a fraction of a second longer than it should have. Marcus looked at the gray counter, then at the woman's tired face, then passed her to the flag standing in the corner beside a bulletin board full of notices no one read unless they had to. United States Navy, he said. The keys on the keyboard paused. Not for long. Just enough for the sound to break. The clerk looked up once, then back at the screen. She did not comment. Whitmore did not either. But Marcus saw the flicker anyway, that brief discomfort when a fact slipped through the cracks and landed where everyone could hear it. He was asked to surrender the contents of his pockets. House keys. Wallet. A folded receipt. Nothing else. When they inventoried the wallet, the military identification finally came into official hands. The same truth he had pointed toward from the beginning. The clerk held it longer than she held the driver's license. Her eyes moved over the seal, the photograph, the issuing line. The room did not go silent, but something close to it passed through. Whitmore stood very still. Marcus said nothing. He did not need to. The card spoke in the flat, unforgiving language of fact. Still, the machine of the station kept moving. Another form. Another signature. Another instruction. That was the strangest part of injustice when it had momentum. Even after truth entered the room, the process did not stop right away. It merely hesitated. The clerk cleared her throat softly and reached for the desk phone. Marcus watched her fingers hover over the buttons as if she already knew this call would go somewhere above everyone in the building. In the hallway behind him, a door opened, letting in a narrow beam of yellow light from an office farther back. Then a voice from that room said one quiet sentence that changed the temperature of the night. Why is the Pentagon calling this station? For one suspended second, nobody in the station moved. The fluorescent lights still hummed overhead. The printer still clicked through the last page of some unrelated report. A deputy at the far desk kept writing until he noticed the silence, then lifted his head slowly, as if he had felt the room tilt before he understood why. Marcus stood at the counter with his wrists still marked and his shoulders steady, watching the clerk hold the phone half an inch above its cradle like it had suddenly become heavier than plastic should have been. Whitmore did not speak. That was the first real crack. Up until then, he had always had something ready, a command, a correction, an official phrase polished enough to pass for certainty. But now the certainty had shifted out from under him, and all that remained was the sound of his breathing and the faint leather creak of his duty belt when he adjusted his stance. From the back office, the voice came again, sharper this time. I asked a question. Why is the Pentagon calling this station? A man in a white shirt and loosened tie stepped into the hall, Captain bars on his collar catching the light. He looked tired in the way men looked after midnight when they expected paperwork and found crisis instead. His eyes moved first to the clerk, then to the identification card still in her hand, then to Marcus, and finally to Whitmore. The sequence told Marcus everything. The captain did not yet know the full story, but he knew enough to understand the order of importance had changed. The clerk swallowed and said, "Sir, the system flagged his credentials after intake." Her voice came out smaller than before. Then a call came through from a Department of Defense liaison office asking for confirmation of status and circumstances. The captain's face tightened by degrees, not dramatically, but with the contained precision of a man already calculating consequences. "Confirmation of what circumstances?" he asked. No one answered immediately. Whitmore opened his mouth once, closed it, then looked toward Marcus as if the man he had dismissed all night had somehow become the source of his discomfort simply by standing there. Marcus met his gaze without anger. That, more than anything, unsettled the officer now. He had expected resistance, fear, maybe even gratitude if the truth came out. What he had not expected was composure. The captain held out his hand. "Give me the identification." The clerk passed it over. He studied the card for several seconds, his thumb resting near the seal, then turned it, and checked the terminal screen beside the counter. Whatever he saw there made the skin along his jaw go rigid. "Unbelievable," he said quietly. It was not theatrical. It was worse than that. It was honest. A second phone rang from the back office, shrill and insistent. Someone picked up on the second ring. A muffled voice answered. Then came a hurried, "Yes, ma'am. He is here." The captain looked up at Marcus again, and for the first time that night someone in authority looked at him like a man instead of a problem. "Mr. Reed," he said, voice careful now, "were you informed of the reason for your detention beyond a preliminary suspicion?" Marcus almost smiled at the wording. It was the sort of sentence institutions used when they were already preparing distance between themselves and the person who had made the mistake. "No, sir," he said. "I was told possible stolen vehicle and false military identification. I offered registration, insurance, witness verification, and badge confirmation at the scene." Every word landed clean. No heat. No embellishment. Just fact after fact, the same facts no one had wanted earlier. The captain turned toward Whitmore. "Did you verify the registration before transport?" Whitmore said nothing. "Did you review witness statements?" Still nothing. "Did you contact the issuing authority on the identification before making custody decisions?" The station seemed to shrink around the questions. At a side desk, one deputy quietly stopped typing. Another lowered a styrofoam cup without taking a sip. Whitmore finally answered, but the words came slower now, stripped of the hard edge he had worn at the gas station. "No, sir. Not prior to intake." The captain looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus could almost hear the entire night rearranging itself inside that silence. Then headlights swept across the front windows from the parking lot outside, not the bouncing wash of a patrol unit, but the low, smooth glide of a government vehicle pulling in with purpose. One of the deputies near the entrance peered through the blinds and muttered under his breath, "Black SUV. Federal plates." No one needed to explain the rest. The call had not been a warning. It had been the beginning. And when the front door opened, and a woman in a dark suit stepped inside, carrying herself with the calm force of someone who never had to raise her voice to be obeyed, Whitmore's face changed in a way Marcus knew he would remember for the rest of his life. The woman who stepped through the station door did not hurry, and that was the first thing everyone noticed. She moved with the kind of control that made rushing unnecessary. Her dark suit was tailored, her silver badge case remained closed in one hand, and her expression held no confusion at all. She already knew why she was there. A man in a charcoal overcoat entered behind her, carrying a slim folder and saying nothing. The front desk deputy straightened instinctively. The captain did the same, though he tried to hide it. "Commander Evelyn Shaw," the woman said, her voice even and unmistakably direct. "Department of Defense Liaison." She did not raise her hand for anyone to shake. She did not waste a second on introductions that did not matter. Her eyes found Marcus first. Not Whitmore. Not the captain. Marcus. She took in the marks at his wrists, the inventory tray on the counter, the military identification card no longer in his possession, and the silence in the room told her the rest. "Mr. Reed," she said, "are you physically all right?" Marcus met her gaze. "Yes, ma'am." It was the first moment all night that felt steady. Not safe yet, but steady. Commander Shaw gave one small nod, then turned toward the captain. "I need the immediate release of this service member, a full preservation order on all body camera footage, dash camera footage, dispatch recordings, booking records, and all surveillance video from the gas station on Route 17. No one spoke. The captain cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. We are in the process of reviewing. Do not review after the fact what should have been verified at the scene," she said, not harshly, but with enough quiet force to flatten every excuse before it could stand up. The man in the overcoat opened the folder and placed several printed pages on the counter. Marcus could not see all the text, but he saw enough official seals and routing lines to understand that this had gone well above the local station before the second phone call had even ended. Whitmore remained near the counter, hands at his sides now, the posture of a man who had discovered too late that authority was not the same thing as protection. Commander Shaw turned to him at last. "Officer Whitmore," she said, reading his name from the embroidered patch without asking for it. "Did Mr. Reed offer identification?" Whitmore swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "Did he direct you to registration and insurance?" "Yes, ma'am." "Did a civilian witness offer real-time verification?" His answer came slower. Yes, ma'am. Commander Shaw held his gaze for 1 second longer than comfort allowed. And you still transported him without confirming any of it. It was not a question. Whitmore looked down. In the fluorescent light, his face had lost all of the brittle confidence he wore at the gas station. He seemed smaller now, not in size, but in certainty. Marcus watched without satisfaction. That surprised him a little. He had imagined that if this moment ever came, if the truth ever arrived carrying enough weight to bend the room, he might feel vindicated. Instead, he felt tired. Tired in the bones. Tired in the chest. Tired in the quiet place where anger usually lived before discipline pressed it flat. The clerk reached for the release paperwork with visibly careful hands. Keys clicked. A printer woke again. The machinery of the station had changed direction now, and that was almost more unsettling than the arrest itself. The same system that had absorbed him without listening was now trying to return him as quickly as possible, as if speed could soften what had already been done. Commander Shaw stepped closer to Marcus while the forms printed. Her voice lowered, enough to give him privacy without pretending the room had earned it. Your mother has been contacted, she said. A member of our office. Spoke with her 10 minutes ago. She knows you are safe. Marcus closed his eyes for the briefest moment. That single sentence reached deeper than any apology could have. When he opened them again, the room seemed sharper, every edge more defined. The captain signed one form, then another. The restraints were removed without ceremony. No one mentioned the gas station receipt. No one mentioned the witness. No one mentioned the security video, silently proving every minute of what had happened. Some truths were too visible now to be spoken aloud. Whitmore finally looked at Marcus, really looked at him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time required the collapse of everything he had assumed. His mouth opened, then closed. The apology was there, somewhere behind his teeth, but it could not yet get past his pride. Marcus saved him from the effort. He reached for his wallet, his keys, and at last his identification card, running his thumb once across the worn edge before sliding it back into his hand. Then he lifted his eyes and said the only thing in the room that sounded like judgment and mercy at the same time. Authority means nothing without discipline.